everybody. Today in this presentation, I will discuss with you regarding the formulation of national and also international standards. Basically, I will discuss how to prepare local standard and how these international standards, especially ISO standards, are prepared, and we'll discuss few of ISO standard management systems standards like ISO 9000 and mainly ISO, and also there are some other organizations like IEC and ITU. Briefly discuss those organizations' scope of work. So first of all, shall we have a look on standardization, and what do you mean by a standard is defined as document established by consensus and approved by a recognized body that provides for common and repeated use, rules, guidelines or characteristics for activities or their results. So that is the definition, but in simple term, it is a document. Standard is a document. So we sometimes say specifications also, but the word is standard. It is a document established by consensus. That is very important. The standard is developed through consensus process. That means all parties related to the particular standard, particular product or the process should participate and should have some participation for the development of the standard, consensus basis, and approved by a recognized body. That is also very important. Standards should be approved by a recognized body. If you take the local standards like SLS standards, it should be approved by Sri Lanka Standard Institution, the governing council. Similarly, if it is an international ISO standard, so that should be approved by the ISO. So likewise, first thing, it should be developed through the consensus process, and second thing, it should be approved by a recognized body. So that is also very important. That provide for common and repeated use, that you can use repeatedly, guidelines, rules, characteristics for activities or their results. So it can be a product standard where you give the specification for a product, or it can be a process, right? It can be a management system, right? So likewise, so there are different kinds of areas covered under this standardization. And if you take the level of standardization, the different levels where standardization is involved, first thing that we can say, individual level, right? Individually we can have our own standards. So that is also standard, right? Sometimes we don't write those things in a document, but we have some standard. But when it comes to the company and above level, there are written standards available. There are some companies, they have their company standard written down, right? So those are also coming under the standards. And association level, sometimes you may have standards. Different associations, maybe trade association or maybe industry. So they may have some sort of standards. National level, so that is the most important level. National levels, you have standards. So if you take the Sri Lanka, we have a Sri Lanka standard at national level. So that can be applied throughout the country, right? National level. So similarly in other countries, so India, they have IS standards. If you take UK, they have British standards, right? So similarly, other countries also, they have their national standards. And then regional level, there are some standards. Some regional level standards also available. Very famous, very common one is the European Union. They have EN standards. So sometimes we call the Europods, right? So that is a regional level that is applied to particular region, right? So those are regional standards, but these Euro standards, EN standards are very famous and very powerful. Sometimes even the ISO international organization also sometimes adopt these European standards because they have a very good system of developing regional level standards. So that is one example, and also in our region there is an organization for the regional standardization. We call it SASO, covering our SAARC region. There is an organization, but it is still under development. So they are making regional standard for these SAARC countries, SASO standards. So that is they will publish very recently special related to civil building construction, and also later they will develop other areas also. So that is regional level, and finally you have the national, international level like ISO, IEC, ITU, right? Those are national level standards. So likewise there are different levels identified for standardization. And if you take the standards are established by different organizations, manufacturers, service providers for their customers, and purchasers, and sometimes the people who are going to purchase something, they will prepare their own standards that should be complied by the supplier, right? Therefore purchasers, they can develop standards. And then voluntary cooperative bodies for specific sectors and national bodies established for that purpose, like SLSI Sri Lanka Standard Institution, that is a national body established for that purpose. Their main function is development of standards. Regional economic bodies at global level, like regional standardization, and international bodies at the apex level like ISO, and sometimes regulatory authorities, regulatory bodies also they establish standards. So therefore there are different organizations, they are preparing standards. But at common practice we use mainly national standard or regional standard or international standard, mainly national and international, right? If you take the standard formulation in our Sri Lanka Standard Institution, standard required by trade and industry and for consumer protection and development activities work. So we have two divisions for the standard development. One is for the scientific standard, other one is for the engineering standards. Engineering standards we have civil, mechanical, electrical and electronic, including IT. And scientific also there is a separate division, food, agriculture, chemical, cosmetic, textile and garment. So engineering division, the works handled by engineers, and scientific division there are scientific graduates who are handling the development of scientific standards. So international standards are adopted whenever applicable. So our practice is, if it is applicable, there are some standards we can directly adopt as Sri Lanka standard, some international standard. So if it is applicable, directly we take international standards. The objective of SLSI, so as given in the Act of Sri Lanka Standard Institution, so it says to prepare standards on national and international basis relating to structures, commodities, products, materials, practices and operations, and from time to time revise, alter and amend the same and promote the general adoption of such standards. So development, and also maybe you need revision of standards, sometimes you need to alter or amend the standards, and also the promotion of application of standards. So that is also given in the Act of Sri Lanka Standard Institution, promotion and the development. So if you take the standard formulation process, as I mentioned, a standard development is a consensus process where you develop standard through consensus. And also when you develop the standard, you have to take the views or the ideas of different parties, mainly the manufacturers, and also you need to get the consumers, users. Those two parties are very important, manufacturers and the users. And also sometimes you get some testing authorities, technologists. So they also involved. So likewise, different parties are involved in the process of developing standard. If you take the formulation project stages, so first thing is proposal, acceptance and allocation of projects. That means the acceptance of the proposal. There are different parties who propose to develop different standards. Sometimes they request for new standards, sometimes they request for revision of the existing standards, sometimes they request for amendment to the existing standard, sometimes they request to adopt some international standards. So likewise, different parties, they give their requirement, give their proposals to develop standards. So depending on the availability of our resources and also the applicability of particular area, so we select projects, right? So we can't accommodate all these proposals, because sometimes we feel that developing a national standard is not really a need for some areas. Maybe we don't have manufacturers sometimes. Sometimes maybe only one party is required. So sometimes due to that fact, there are instances that we can't develop standards proposed by some parties. But generally, we take all the proposals and we allocate these standard development projects to different standard officers, engineers. And then we do the planning, and then committee means that we discuss the draft standards in the committee. And then circulation, so I will give you in detail circulation and final committee. Circulation means that we, after preparing the draft standard, we publish that standard in the newspaper and give 2 months period to public to comment on the standard. So that's a public circulation stage. 2 months period is given by publishing in the newspaper in 3 languages, and after that again we discuss with the committee with the feedback from the public, and then again it goes to the final committee approval and then the printing. Sometimes we don't print the standards now, so we maintain the soft copies. Whenever requests are received, then we sometimes print or sometimes give the soft copies. As I mentioned, the proposal stage, there are different parties, they request for standards development. The ministries and consumers, producers, industries, associations, sometimes the different associations, they come and request standards. And also within SLSI we have different divisions. They also request sometimes, especially for revision and amendment of the standards. So if you take our laboratory division, so they are doing the testing, product testing. So they sometimes come and tell that they need to amend this standard, they need to do some revision to the standard. So likewise, sometimes internally requests are come. And also members of our working group and the sectoral committees, the committees that involve in the standard development process, and some sister organizations like Consumer Affairs Authority, or maybe sometimes Import and Export Control Department, sometimes Public Utilities Commission. So likewise, they also request development of standard. So through different processes means that we get the proposal for develop the standards. And sectoral committees, we have mainly sectoral committees. Those are established committees in SLSI. Those committees are approved by the Council of SLSI, the governing body of SLSI. And the members from different areas, maybe sometimes manufacturers, sometimes users, sometimes university academic staff, sometimes the testing authorities, maybe sometimes consultants. So different, mainly we get the participation of manufacturers and also the users. So if you can find some association that, because we can't get all the people to the process, but try to get the representation of all sectors, right? So if they have a consumer organization, so we can get the participation of consumers. So sometimes there are bulk users of that particular item, so then we can get their participation. So manufacturers, definitely they are very much involved in this process, and especially university staff, and mainly from the testing authorities, because when you develop a standard, you have to check whether, see whether that product or that particular item can be tested in our testing laboratories. So therefore their participation is very much important, right? And projects are handled by standards engineers, and they do the planning and also organizing and coordinating activities and collection and presentation of data, that they have to collect some data and present to the committee, and also they have to collect different related standard, maybe international standard or some other standard. So sometimes we develop our standard, we give special consideration to our regional level standards. India, maybe Malaysia, maybe Indonesia, because when you apply those standards, so sometimes we found that our regional countries, they are very much involved in these training activities. So therefore we have to see, we have to check whether our neighboring countries, their standards and our standards are compatible. So therefore we mainly collect information from different countries when you develop the standards. And role of standards engineers, those who are handling these projects, project managers, they arrange laboratory tests, trial and investigations, and sometimes they have to do industrial survey and meetings. They have to arrange, we have regular meetings in SLSI to develop the standards. Meeting of the sectoral committee, and also we have another type of committee we call as working groups. And document submission and preparation of minutes, we have to maintain the minutes of the meetings and provide executive assistance to each sectoral committee working group. So those are the roles of standards engineers, project managers. So when you take the committee stage, so committee stage, you will have a basic draft, and that is circulated among the members. So we have main committee, sectoral committee. If you take mechanical area, we have a separate one sectoral committee, and also we have a number of working groups, small groups, maybe 3 to 5 members. So they are mainly do the drafting purpose, right? They do the drafting and they check the document, and after that only that will go to the sectoral committee. So mainly before sending to public circulation, we have to get the approval from the sectoral committee, and after the public circulation, again the comments received from the public, discuss in the meetings, working group meetings, and again it goes to the final sectoral committee. After approving only, that will go to the SLSI Council for authorization. A decision to approve the working draft shall be taken on the basis of consensus. As I mentioned earlier, that's a consensus basis process. Once it is approved, it goes to public circulation as a draft standard. Public circulation, that we publish the standard in 3 languages, 3 newspapers, Dinamina, Daily News and Dinakaran, and we give a 2 months period to public to comment. So publish means that we can't publish all the standard or the document. We publish the title of the standard and also sometimes the basic scope of the standard. So entire document that we can't publish. If anybody is interested, they can collect a free copy from SLSI to go through the copy, and they can give their comments. So when the 2 months period completed, we collect all the comments from the public and discuss in the committee again. If it is really appropriate, so then we will include those comments, and again it will go to the main committee. And the sectoral committee review all comments on the draft standard and decide incorporation of comments. The decision to approve the working draft shall be taken on the basis of consensus principle. An approval, the draft approved by sectoral committee is submitted for the council, that is the council of SLSI. So they do the formal authorization, but they don't basically don't review the standard. They just approve the standard, but all technical matters are discussed in the working group and the sectoral committee. So sometimes the council they don't have the technical competency to check the standard, but there are some representation, but basically they will see the structure of the standard and they will approve it. And after the council approval, it becomes a national standard, and we will allocate the number and the published year. Number and the published year. So year of publication. Both are very important, number and the published year, because standards are revised, and you have to specifically mention standard and the year of publication. Both are very important. Amendments. So issue of amendments to Sri Lanka standard is kept to a minimum. That means if there are any amendments you need for the standard, so that can be again discussed in the committee, but we try to keep amendments as minimum as possible, because when you put a lot of amendments, the reading of the standard become very difficult. So, but if there are instances that we need to introduce some amendments to the standard, that if there are any technology enhancement, especially that we have to do an amendment. Small changes that we accommodate through an amendment. If there is a big change, I mean entire standard is going to change, then that will be done through a revision. Amendment procedure, typographical errors and reference changes are corrected as a matter of routine. Issue of corrigendum, we call it as a corrigendum if there are any typographical errors that you have to correct. And technical amendment, if there are any technical change, so that is we have to discuss in the committee. If there are any typographical, that will no need to discuss in the committee, that we can do. If there are any technical changes, then you have to discuss in the committee, and the relevant amendment is done. So, however, this amendment also should be approved by the sectoral committee, relevant sectoral committee. And the revisions, so when you make number of amendments, the usage of the standard become very difficult. So that's the one reason for the revision. Or sometimes there may be instances that you totally change your maybe lot of advancement of the technology due to that fact that substantial amount of changes that you have to do for the existing standard. So then also you revise the standard. When you do the revision, that also follows the same process of development standard. You have discussed in the working group and go to the sectoral committee, and you need to get the public circulation 2 months period, and again come back to the committee and discuss the comments. Similar process you have to follow, similar to the new standard development. So therefore revision of the standard also take a lot of time to revise the standard. So standards are subject to change. Anytime we can change the standard. Sometimes after few months we need to change the standards. So those are not concrete documents. So anytime, sometimes after few months, maybe after 6 months, you have to change the standard due to different reasons. Sometimes the technology reasons, sometimes there are some unclear area in the standard. So those things can happen. Therefore, regularly we have to review the standards. Basically, that standards are supposed to revise every 5 years. If there are any changes that you have to make to the standard, or sometimes you can reaffirm the standard. So generally, every 5 years we need to look into the content of the standard. So if there are any changes need, then you can do the revision sometimes, or otherwise you can continue with the same standard. Amendment and reaffirmation indicating the continuance current standard after necessary changes to bring it to the reaffirmation means after you check the standard, you will find that there is no change required. Then you can put a seal again, reaffirm with a new year, right? So reaffirm in 2016. So it will become valid in 2016 again. Sometimes you need to withdraw some standards, right? Withdraw some standard. Very rarely we need to withdraw the standard completely. Maybe if there is any prohibition or banning of some material, right? If some material is banned, then you have to completely withdraw the standard. So likewise, there are not always, there are some instances that you need to withdraw the standard. So local national standard development process. So if you have any questions regarding that section, please. Yes. Sorry? Yes. How they? Yeah. Normally, so when you when we send for the public circulation, so if there are few manufacturers, we definitely send for those manufacturers copies of draft standard. But anybody can take a draft standard from our library free of charge, right? In the circulation period, right? Public circulation period. But there are some instances that we have list of manufacturers. For example, that if you take the UPVC manufacturers, we have a list of current manufacturers because we have some association with those people due to the SLS mark process. So those people, we have the list of manufacturers. Then we definitely send a draft standard for those manufacturers. but not always. We don't have all manufacturers list, but anybody can take a copy from the library, draft standard before publish it, draft standard, and send their comment within the period, right? Within that 2 months period. After that also you can comment if there are any changes that we will consider it for the next revision. But during that public comments period, that is very important to make your comments, right? But unfortunately, the people, they don't see this in the newspapers. They don't comment. Very, very rarely we get the comments. But when it apply actually, then only the people come and say that we have this problem. Likewise, then only real problem coming out from the particular standard. Anyway, that we anytime you can suggest, but if you suggest at that particular point, then very easy to accommodate those requests to the standard. So if you give your comments after publishing the standard, it will take some time to correct those things. Okay. Any more questions about standard development process? So then we will discuss about the contents and the presentation of the standard. So if you take any standard, that will the main content, the body of the standard start with the scope of the standard. Scope means that will give the area of application. Every standard commences with a scope, indicate the form of standardization, define subject of documents and aspect covered, limit of applicability. It shall not contain the requirement. The scope, we don't give the requirement. So we just mention that the applicable area, right? It is a very short statement. Every standard start with the scope, area of applicability. And then you have references. That means when you read the standard, there are some instances you refer to another standard, right? So those references are listed in the standard after the scope. A complete list of other standards and documents which are indispensable for the application of the standard. It shall include the designation number and the title of the standard. So when you read the standard, it is very important that if you see a reference standard with the year of publication, that means you have to take and you have to see, you have to refer only that particular standard with the year of publication. If you see a reference without the year of publication, that means you have to always check whether this standard is revised or whether there are new standards are published, and you have to apply the current standard. So under the reference, all the standard referred in the text of the standard, body of the standard, are listed under the references. And then you have the terms and definitions. So there are some definitions that you need to give in the standard. So give definitions necessary for the understanding of the certain terms used in the standard. In some cases, it shall be referred to a definition given in another standard. Sometimes that you refer this definition to another standard, because when you develop a standard, you can't give all the things in the one standard. Sometimes you need to refer to a different standard, right? Even definition, sometimes we refer to a different standard depending on the particular standard content. And then the most important part, the requirements. So those are we sometimes say the specifications, like. So requirements, you have the requirement of raw material sometimes. So all the requirements are given in the requirement clause. That is the most important part, where you need to comply to that particular requirement, right? Characteristic required, limit of these characteristics, reference to test methods to be used to determine the characteristics. So sometimes you need to refer to the different test methods. So those are given under the requirement clause. So that is the most important and most needed clause of the standard. So then you have the marking and labeling, that depends on the type of the product, so that varies, but generally, so these are the contents that is given in the marking clause. You have the manufacturer's name, address, or the trademark, and model or type. So depending on the particular item, that will vary, but generally it will ask the model or the type. Sometimes there should be a way to trace back your product, traceability, right? So lot number is the most common thing that we use to trace back your product. Lot number, sometimes the sizes and grades applicable. So if you take the steel, that you have different sizes, different diameters, and different grades also there. So likewise, depending on the type of the product, sizes and grades are required. And labeling requirement, so that is also important, especially the food product, the label is very much important. And handling instructions, hazard warning, date of manufacture, so those are labeling requirements. And the means and presentation of such marking, so how you present these things in the marking. So maybe you have to attach a nameplate, label, stamp, so those are also should be clearly mentioned in the marking clause of the standard. And also the location of the particular marking, where you need to mark. So if you take different products, the marking is different from one product to one product, right? Sometimes you need to mark at particular intervals, right? For example, if you take PVC pipes, you can see there are markings maybe in each 1 meter length, right? Meter by meter, you have the marking. So likewise, that depends on the product, but generally these are the things that you need to cover under the marking requirements. And method of test, sometimes you have to refer method of test to a different standard, another standard, because there are special standard for the test methods. For example, if you take for tensile testing, there are separate standards. So therefore, we don't put all these things in the product standard. We just refer the tensile testing to that particular tensile testing standard. It says that tensile testing shall be carried out as given in SLS blah blah blah. Likewise, you can give the reference to another standard. And sampling, the definition of lot. So when you do the sampling, you need to clearly define your lot, right? Other terms for the sampling, scale of sampling and the procedure to be adopted in drawing sample drawing, especially in the food products, the sample drawing methods and the intervals are very important. And condition for maintaining the samples, that is also very much applicable for the food items. No? So when you get the sample, you need to preserve the sample until you test. So therefore, conditions for maintaining samples till the time of testing is very much important, especially for the food product. A number of samples to be tested with respect to each characteristics also should be mentioned under the sampling. Right? Criteria for conformity means that you need to mention in the standard how you verify your product is conform to the standard. Standard shall be so written that conformity can be assessed by a manufacturer or supplier, we call them as first party, and user or the purchaser second party, or independent body third party. So if you take the SLSI is testing the product, is the third party inspection, right? So we should know how to check the conformity of that product. So that should be clearly given in the standard under the criteria for conformity. So sometimes you have the sampling plan and lot acceptance, right? So you need to select number of samples, and you can sometimes take samples. So likewise, the criteria for conformity give you the method how to verify whether your product is conform to the standard. So by looking the criteria for conformity, we can verify whether our product is conform or not after testing, right? Yeah. So that is about the content of the standard. So if you have anything regarding the contents of the standard, please. Any questions? No questions. Okay. Then we'll go to international standards. So when you talk about the international standardization, a small spelling mistake, it should be International Organization of Standardization. T is missing, no? That is ISO. That is the largest organization voluntary for the development of voluntary standards. So International Organization for Standardization. So we generally call it as ISO, but if you tell it correctly, it should be not ISO, it should be ISO. So it is not an abbreviation. If you put the abbreviation, it should be IOS, no, International Organization of Standardization. But they use ISO to indicate that that is unique. That means only one organization. One organization covered entire world. ISO means one. So therefore, correct pronunciation should be ISO, not ISO. But we all used to call it as ISO. ISO is the largest voluntary standard development organization. Their objective is given as to promote the development of standardization and related activities in the world with a view to facilitating international exchange of goods and services and to developing cooperation in the spheres of intellectual, scientific, technological and economic activity. That is their defined objective. And so when you take the ISO standard, why we need ISO standard? So there are a lot of benefits, advantages of this ISO standard, international standards. ISO standard make development, manufacturing of supply and products and services more efficient and safer and cleaner. They provide you a platform for any kind of products. So they will develop standard, they are developing standard for the manufacturing, supply of products and services. So it make easy for others to follow these processes. And also they make trade between countries easier and fairer. When you have international standard, trading between countries is easy, right? So if you have a common standard, so you can refer those standards in different countries, no? So if you have ISO standard, that means you can supply your product for different countries. So there is a very important advantage for country to do the international trading. And also they provide governments with the technical base for health, safety and environmental legislation, right? When government want to put a legislation or the technical regulation, they can use this ISO standard as guidelines, right? As guidelines. And they furnish tools to meet in the challenges of sustainable development, especially in the recent years that we talk much about the sustainable development, and these standards are developed considering the sustainable of that particular item, sustainability of that particular item. And also another very important advantage is, so it helps to transfer the technology to developing countries. So that is a very important advantage, especially the developing countries having, is getting the technology from developed countries. Because when they develop ISO standard, the all developed countries are involved. So therefore, the latest technologies and the method of manufacturing all can be transferred through these standards. So therefore, it is a very important advantage of getting this technology from the developed countries to the developing countries. And also they safeguard users and consumers and make many aspects of their lives simpler. So when you have the standards, it means that international standards, that you feel very comfortable when you do, especially the international trade. Right? So those are the important benefits of international standard, ISO standards. And they have published, I think, more than not 90,000, more than 20,000 now international standards, including the ISO 9000 and 14,000. Those are very, very familiar and very famous standards. Families, we call them families because if you take ISO 9000, there are a number of standards related to that 9000. So 9000, 9001. 9004 likewise. So therefore it's called as families of standard, and includes entire range of business and technology from standards for traditional activities such as agriculture and construction through mechanical engineering to medical devices. So that means the ISO covers all the scope except that very few area which are covered by the ITU and IEC. Electrical ITU, IEC and ITU cover the telecommunication standards. All other areas are covered by ISO. And develop standard to meet market requirements. The work is carried out by more than 3,000 technical bodies and involve more than 35,000 experts. So they have experts from different countries and they have these committees. They are having the meetings, right? And they do the standardization. It is a very big organization for develop ISO standards. More than 3,000 technical bodies and more than 35,000 experts are involved in this standard development process. ISO standards are, so any standard, when you develop a standard, so it is a voluntary standard. Right? Voluntary means if you want, you can comply, you can apply the standard. So those are not compulsory. Only the compulsory means that some authority, they have to make it compulsory. Then only it becomes a compulsory standard. Therefore, ISO, once they prepare the standard, it is naturally it is a voluntary standard. Anybody can make use of that standard, maybe manufacturers or maybe purchasers, maybe contractors, they can use. The fact they are developed in a response to market demand and are based on the consensus among the interested parties, ensures widespread use of the standard. So therefore, any standard developed by ISO is become a voluntary standard. But if anybody wants to make it mandatory, they can do it mandatory. For example, if you take the construction area, that the ICTAD, they may require some organization to, for the registration, the ISO 9000 certification is compulsory. So likewise, some organizations, they can make it compulsory for their requirement. But ISO doesn't do that kind of things. They don't do any standard mandatory, right? So those are voluntary standards. ISO is able to act as a bridging organization in which consensus can be reached on solutions that meet both a requirement of business and the broader needs of society, such as this. So ISO is the main standard development body, so that will act as a bridge for different organizations, right? They have a lot of they have a very good network covering all countries in the world. So they have members, more than I think 160 members, covering all standards bodies in different countries. If you take Sri Lanka, that SLSI is represented in ISO. Likewise, the national standard body of each country represent ISO. So they support the development of international standard, and through this process, they develop the international standards. So national body of each country is accepted for the membership. Any national standard body, they can be a member of this. Member bodies are entitled to participate and exercise full voting right. So they have a voting process when they develop the standard. So when you get the membership, you are entitled to the voting process. More than 70% ISO members bodies are government institutions or organizations incorporated by the public code. So if you take some developed countries, they have some standard organizations. Those are not really public organizations. So they develop their standards sometimes using they have a good network of manufacturers. So sometimes those are not government organizations. But generally in developing countries, we have national standard bodies are government organizations. So more than 70% government organizations. And so there are different kind of membership in ISO. So first thing that we mentioned here, correspondent member is usually an organization, a country which does not yet have a fully developed. So there are some countries, they don't have a good system, good standard development system. They are not still have a matured system. So those countries, they can get the correspondent membership. So they don't have this voting power, but they get the information, they get the updation from the ISO for the corresponding members. Corresponding members do not take an active part in the technical and policy development work of interest to them. And then you have the subscriber membership for countries which have very small economies, right? So there are very few very small organized countries. They can get the subscriber membership. That means they are subscribed actually. They are not charged very much for their participation. So they pay very reduced membership fee to maintain their membership. So that is for a very small economies. So they also have the similar committees. They have the technical committees, different technical committees, and also subcommittees, working groups, and representing different countries in the ISO organization. So they have a separate technical management board. The decisions to establish a technical committee is taken by this technical management board. Each technical committee may in turn establish subcommittees. So technical committee can appoint or establish subcommittees, working groups to cover different aspects of its work. And so there are membership category we call as P members. They are participating members. So they have the full voting right and they can participate for the meetings. So if we are really interested in that particular area, then we can get the P membership for that particular committee. right? So they have the full authority, voting powers also. So the P members are the most important members of that committee. So one of P member is designated to act as the secretariat of that particular committee or the subcommittee, and member bodies which wish only to be kept informed of the work of technical committee or subcommittee are registered as O members. O members means observers. So they are not participating in the committee meetings, but they get the information from the committee, right? But you can't vote for that standards, the voting process that you can't participate. ISO standards are developed as a result of agreement between the member bodies. So if you have a proposal in the member body, so then you have to get the support of other countries, and then you can request to develop a standard. Confirmation of the market requirement for such standard. So there should be a market requirement to develop a standard. So when you have a proposal, you have to support with the market requirement. And ISO Central Secretariat, they will register the item in their registration. The first thing they do, they prepare a committee draft. They call it as a CD, document circulated for study within the technical committee or subcommittee. That is the basic draft they prepare initially, committee draft. So this document must pass through a number of stages before it can be accepted as an international standard. And when you have the committee draft, so that will be discussed in the committee, and they will come with the draft international standard. That means once they discuss in the committee the basic draft and they do some adjustment as when necessary, and prepare the draft international standard. So that is circulated for the voting, right? Draft international standard, DIS. So that is for voting. So all P membership, they can do their voting. So that is like so we have the public circulation. So we have a system to publish in the newspaper and get the comments. So here they have the voting system. They will circulate it among their members, and they have to vote for that particular standard. So you can give the vote with your comments. So that will be taken into account. And you need to have at least 75% votes for this DIS to further process. It is not approved just after one vote. After getting 75 votes, then if you get in favor of that particular standard, then you proceed as a final draft standard. It called as FDIS, that is a final draft international standard. So then again that will be circulated for voting. Similarly, you need to get 75% of votes to be approved as an international standard. Again, 70 voters must be in favor of the FDIS. So therefore, there are two stages of getting votes from the membership. They need to get the 75% votes to publish as an international standard. So as I mentioned earlier, that you can't have a standard forever, that you need to have periodic revisions. So due to technical evolution, new methods and material, new quality and safety requirements, therefore the ISO has a system to review all standard every 5 years time. So they have a system to review all standard every 5 years. If there any need is there, then they will do a revision or make an amendment, or sometimes they will reaffirm the standard. reaffirm means the same standard will be continued with a new date of publishing. So when it comes to ISO standard, so it is very famous. There are some management system standard we use in our industries. If you take, I think ISO 9000 is the most famous and most widely used standard in the world. 9000, and again we have a very famous standard ISO 14000 for the environmental management system, and there are some other standard 26000 social responsibility, and 50001 it is fairly new standard, 50001 for the energy management, and 22000 for the food safety management. So those are very famous standards, famous popular ISO standards. If you take this 9000, so that is the most famous standard. So those are management system standards, right? Standard basically you can have two types. One is a product standard, the second one is a management system standard. Product standards means that you give the requirement of a product. For example, if you take cement, right? You have a separate standard. If you take SLS, there are separate standard for the cement. If you take SLS 107, that is for the OPC cement. So that will give the requirement of that cement, right? The strength and the other things. So those are product standard that will give the requirement of the product. These 9000 and 14000, those are system standards. Those are not product standards, right? System standards that will give the requirement of that particular system. 9000 gives the requirement of quality management system, how you should maintain your quality management system. So those are system standards. 40,000 also system standard. So that will give how you manage your environmental management system in the organization. So therefore these most famous standards are management system standards, right? So 9000, so there is a new version now. End of last year they published ISO 9001 2015, right? Still we don't, our organization, they don't have converted to this new requirements. So it is published in end of last year, 9001 2015. Earlier we had 9001 2008, right? Year of publication is 2008. So that is the standard where these all organizations they have the certification, 9001 2008, but the new one is 2015, right? Last year September or October they published this new standard. So 9000, it is the, as I mentioned, the 9000 is a family of standards, right? There are few other standards in the family. 9001 is the main standard where you have the requirement of the quality management system, right? Other standards are supportive standards. Like if you take ISO 9000 2015, it is also published, revised recently. It covers the basic concept and language, like the definitions and the technical jargon is given in 9000 standard, 9000. And 9004, it will give the guideline for organization who are implementing this 9001 standard guideline. And another related standard is 19011. It gives the internal external audit of quality management system, how to do the audit of the quality management system. So therefore that is also related to this 9000 family. So therefore if you take this all 9000 standard, 9001 is the most important standard, because that is the only standard you can get the certification, right? So that is very important to understand. If somebody says we have ISO 9000, that means that organization is certified against ISO 9001, right? Not 9000, 9001 standard. That is the standard where these requirements are laid out, right? 9000 is just a terminology, right? For example, if you go through this 9001 standard, there are a lot of terms used like this corrective action, preventive action, non-conformity. So those things are defined in 9000 standard, right? That gives the terminology. So therefore 9001 is the most important standard where you can get the certification only against 9001, right? So other standards are just to support the implementation of 9001 standard. And ISO 9000 or 2015 sets out the, so if you take the 2008 also, no problem, because this is very recently published. Even other countries also, they don't have converted to the new ISO standard. They have a period of, I think, more than 2-3 years to entire conversion of organization. Those have already certified. So therefore this ISO 9000 sets out the criteria for quality management system and is the only standard in the family that can be certified. That is very important. 9001 is the only standard that you can get the certification. It can be used by any organization. That is also very important. The 9001 standard can be used by any organization, right? Maybe manufacturing, service, whatever organization, maybe very large, medium, small, any kind of organizations, they can use this 9000 standard. Therefore, we call it as a generic standard where any organization can apply this standard. In fact, ISO 9000 standard is implemented by over 1 million companies and organizations in over 170 countries as at now. So therefore, that is the, so we can say that is the number one standard where most of the organizations are certified to. So if you have any questions regarding 9000, I think most of the organizations, they are applying this 9000 standard. So any questions regarding the 9000 family? I'm sure there should be some questions regarding the 9000 standard. No any problems? No any questions? Okay. Then similarly you have ISO 14001, that is for the environmental management system, right? So that is also similar to this 9000 family. 14000 also there are some similar standard, but 14001 is the standard where you get the certification, right? So if somebody says we have ISO 14000, that means that the organization is certified against ISO 14001 standard. That is also newly revised 2015, but still we have the old version, that is 2004. 2004 is the old version. So we have the certification to that old standard. So ISO 14001 sets out the criteria for environmental management system and can be certified. It does not state requirement for environmental performance, but maps out framework that a company or organization can follow to set up an effective environmental management system. If you take any kind of this system standard, it doesn't give you the specific requirement. It can't give you the specific requirement because those are generic standard. As I mentioned, any organization can apply. Therefore, you can't give specific requirement in the standard. So therefore, that will give the generic requirements. You have to adopt depending on your activities, depending on your organization. So therefore, similar to 9000, this 14001 also generic standard. Any organizations can apply to improve their environmental performance. So if you take the benefits of ISO 14000, it will reduce your cost of waste management and saving in consumption of energy and material, that will save the energy saving, and lower distribution cost, that will reduce your distribution cost, right? Because you don't generate a lot of waste if you follow these standards. You generate very less waste, and therefore distribution is less. And improve corporate image among regulators, customers and the public. So that is also very important. No? So if you are certified, that you can say that we are certified against ISO 14000, that will improve your corporate image. So sometimes we use these standards for that purpose also. But other than that, there are a lot of benefit, that you reduce your waste management, right? And finally you are helping the world to save the energy and save the environment. So likewise, there are a lot of benefits of implementing ISO 14001 standard. And similarly, you have ISO 26000, that is also fairly famous standard. ISO 26000, year of publication is 2010, provide guidelines rather than requirements. So it is a guiding standard. It will give you the guidelines, not really requirements. So therefore it cannot be certified. So you can't get the certification. Instead, it helps clarify social responsibility, help business and organizations translate principles into effective actions, and shares best practices related to social responsibility. So it talks about the social responsibility. This standard was launched in 2010 following 5 years of negotiation between many different stakeholders across the world, representatives from government, NGOs, industry. So those have involved this standard. It is basically for the social responsibility. So therefore it gives some guidelines. You can't directly give the requirements of such area. It gives basically guidelines. And then you have the ISO 50001, that is also becoming very famous these days for the energy management. With this energy crisis, so ISO in 2011 they published this standard, fairly new standard. So it is becoming very popular these days, because you can save a lot of energy. So that will, in a way, that will help to reduce your cost, and also you will help to have a very energy efficient system in the organization. So therefore that is very important, because you can show that the direct financial benefits out of this standard implementation, and also that you will help to protect the environment by consuming less energy. ISO 50001 is based on the management system model of continual improvement, also used for other well-known standards such as 9000. Similar methods, like similar system in 9000, 14000 and 50000. It developed a policy for more efficient use of energy. Mainly that there are two things that will highlight. First thing is energy efficiency, to use energy more efficiently. Second thing is to use the renewable energy as much as possible. So those are the two main areas coming under ISO 50000. Efficient use of energy, and also use of renewable energy as much as possible. Those are the two main areas considered under ISO 50000. So those are also management system standards. And also there is another important standard, ISO 22000, that is for the food safety management. In that area, they use this ISO 22000 to ensure the food safety of particular item, right? So it is also, you can get the certification 22000. It maps out what an organization need to do to demonstrate its ability to control food safety hazards in order to ensure that food is safe. So food safety assurance system, right? It can be used by any organization similar to 9000, 14000. This also can be used by any organization irrespective of their field of activity, and they ensure the food safety throughout their food chain, right? And so we talk about ISO, so that is the main organization involved in the international standardization. Other than that, there are another two organizations, those who involve in this international standardization. IEC, so they mainly deal with this electrical standardization. Their mission given to promote international cooperation in all issues: electrotechnical standardization, assessment of conformity standards in electrical, electronic and related technologies. They will cover only this area. And their scope is electrical, electronics, magnetic and electromagnetic, electroacoustics, energy production and distribution. These are mainly, they will prepare standard for the electrical and electronic, right? Main areas. Other than, there are some other areas also covered. But if you take these wiring regulations and all these electrical standards are prepared by IEC, international standard prepared by IEC. Similar to the ISO standard, there are a lot of benefits of developing IEC standard. It says facilitate world trade, similar benefits, and you can develop the international trading, and it will give you advantage of international trading, and also you can ensure the greater productivity and quality, and you can ensure the interoperability, that you can exchange different items. So likewise, there are a lot of benefits coming out of this ISO standards also, IEC standards also. Mainly they deal with electrical standard. If you find any electrical standard international developed by IEC. And finally, you have the International Telecommunication Union, ITU. Should be International Telecommunication Union, ITU, established as an impartial international organization within which government and the private sector could work together to coordinate the operation of telecommunication network and services. So telecommunication standards are developed by this ITU. So their main role is developing telecommunication. So therefore telecommunication is done by ITU, electrical and electronics but done by IEC, all other areas covered by ISO. Right? So they deal with designing advanced multimedia system which handle a mix of voice, data, audio and video signals, and also develop partnership between government and private industry is helping bring about rapid improvement in the telecommunication infrastructure in the world's underdeveloped economies. And also they manage the radio frequency spectrum, radio-based systems like the cellular phones and pages, aircraft and maritime navigation system also handled by this ITU, and also these research stations, satellite, radio, television broadcasting. So those are very highly technical area related to telecommunication is handled by ITU, right? So therefore the ITU, so SLSI we don't have a interaction with ITU. So our local member body for ITU is TRC, Telecom Regulatory Commission. So they are representing this ITU for the development of international standard for telecommunication. So that's all about standards development, national and international. So we have some more time. If you have any questions, so we can quickly discuss. Yes. Yes. Yeah, there are some organizations already certified, especially hotel sector. They are very keen about this energy management system. Some hotels already certified. Jetwin Group, I think they have already certified more than 5-6 hotels, and some manufacturing organizations. Few I can remember is McBurton at Jayala. Those who are manufacturing these McFoils, they got the certification, and all the organizations, they are in the process of getting this certification. Most of the organizations, they have started this certification process, but mainly this hotel, I think they are using a lot of energy in the hotel industry. So therefore, they are very much keen about this 50,000 standard, so that you have a direct impact to your electricity bill. So therefore, you can justify the implementation of such standard you need to justify for the top people, management, the benefit of the standard. If you can reduce your electricity bill and show them, so definitely you can justify your certification. So therefore, this 50,000 is very famous these days, energy management system. Any more questions? No questions? Yes. Sorry?
What type of questions you expect
For that? You can see some of the past papers. So that will, mostly the history will repeat, right? So therefore, if you just go through last 2-3 years, so that is enough, right? You cover at least 3 years past papers, right? Generally, there are a lot of much areas that we covered, very few areas. So you can see that most of the questions are repeated, right? So no worry. It's not a very technical area, no? So you can understand. I think just to do at least 3 past papers, then you will cover most of the areas, right? History repeats, huh? Yes.
There are some companies like STS.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, certification is there is no relationship with ISO. That certification is done by certification body. So there are some private organizations, they have this accreditation from different accreditation bodies, right? So ISO developed the standard, as I mentioned. Once they develop the standard, it becomes a voluntary standard, right? Certification is done by some other organizations. So we, as SLSI, we do the certification as the government body, only government body, that we have some advantages since we are in the government sector. But even the private organizations, especially some multinational organizations, they are doing this certification. They need to have a accreditation from some accreditation body, right? So if you have the accreditation, you can do the certification, right? If you take early, actually we didn't have accreditation body in Sri Lanka, but now we have accreditation body Sri Lanka Accreditation Board SLAB. So that is available in Sri Lanka now. So you can get the accreditation from SLAB, or you can get the accreditation from any international organizations. There are a lot of, even SLSI we had earlier the international accreditation from SWEDAC or something. So now we have both international and local accreditation. If you have the accreditation, then you can do the certification. Then the certification is valid. Right? Accreditation means they will give the certification for the certification body. Right? If SLSI is doing the certification, then somebody should certify us, no? So that is done by the accreditation body. So they are the apex body in this quality infrastructure. So therefore, there can be private organizations who do the certification, the SGS, DNV. There are some multinational organizations. So those are also valid, but as the national organization, SLSI, we have, I think, more than 75% this market share in ISO certification. But there are some organizations they are doing private sector. It's not. I mean, there is no problem of doing that. But only thing, you have to practice this in a very sensitive manner, because the certification you can do, but the effectiveness of the certification is the most important thing. You can certify the organization, but if you don't get at the end of the day anything from the certificate, so then there is no valid for the certificate, no. So therefore, the benefit arising out of the certifications is very much important, not the certificate hanging on the wall. So therefore, we feel that we have a very good pool of experts in SLSI, and but there are some organizations, they do the consultancy and do the certification very quickly. But we feel that that should be done by experts, the certification, and also after certification you need to have a frequent auditing, right? Frequent auditing, and ensure that system is maintained, right? That is the important part, not getting the certification. How you maintain it is very much important. So there are some private organizations also doing, especially some multinational organizations, DNV, SGS, few other also. Because system certification is possible by some, but if you take this SLS mark like product certification, SLS mark can be done only by SLSI. That product certification can't be done by any other organization. System certification is 9,000, 14,000. So it is not restricted to the national standard body. Not restricted. If you can get the accreditation from accreditation body, the accreditation gives the validity of that particular certificate, right? So they may have accreditation for different organizations, from different organizations. Any questions? Sorry? Accreditation bodies? Regulation. Yes. Regulation is it's a different part. I mean, so they can use the standard for their regulations. For example, there are a lot of standards used by Consumer Affairs Authority in Sri Lanka to prepare the technical regulations. They have prepared some technical regulations. Those have become legal requirements. SLSI is not a legal body, that we can't make any regulations. We prepare the standard and we give our technical know-how to other organizations to implement the standards. So Consumer Affairs Authority, they have a lot of standards made mandatory, right? For example, if you take the SLS 107 for cement, it's a mandatory standard. So that is gazetted by Consumer Affairs Authority, not by SLSI. But we give our service to implement that, but that is done by Consumer Affairs Authority. Those are legal organizations, legal authorities. We can't do that. SLSI can't do that. We give our service to implement them. Consumer Affairs Authority and Import and Export Control Department. So they control all imports. There are some items identified as compulsory items. So when these items are imported to Sri Lanka, that check against our standards. There are 123 items currently. So they have gazetted these notifications, gazetted these regulations. So they use our standards and they use our service to implement those things, right? We do the inspection, testing, and give the approval for that kind of things. But the legal power we don't have. We are not a legal authority. Okay, then thank you very much. If you don't have any questions, so we can wind up.
Maybe answering there is short answer and long answer.
Short answer or short question, short answer. No need for long answers. Definitely, we expect only the particular answer. I mean, no need of giving lot of details. No. So, if you read these past papers, that you can understand that type of the questions. Not difficult, very easy. Right. And also, you just follow the notes. Then no problem. Okay, then thank you. Yes.
There are fake label, SLS label products. Do you have any?
SLS mark products.
Fairly not.
With SLS mark. Yes, as I mentioned that we have there are two certifications: product certification and system certification. This ISO 9000, 14000, those are system certification that can be done by some other organizations also. But SLS mark is done by only SLSI. So that is for the product certification. For example, if you take cement, right? If you want to get the SLS mark, cement is a compulsory item. You need to get the SLS mark, otherwise you can't do the marketing of cement. It's compulsory. So if any cement manufacturing organization, if they want to do the business, they need to get the SLS mark from SLSI. That is granted only by SLSI. That means a product standard, that means your product is tested against the standard requirement. So we need to test the product. But in 9000 we don't need to test the product. We don't check the product, right? No testing involved. We just, yes.
I mean, some products they use SLS without getting the certificate actually.
Yes.
They are using it daily to
Yeah,
sell
yeah,
the product.
yeah.
Do you have legal?
Yeah, that is also handled by the Consumer Affairs Authority. Consumer Affairs Authority. We don't have the legal authority, but they will refer that complaints to us. Then we will investigate and support them to implement it. So, but the legal authority is with them, Consumer Affairs Authority. But definitely they will communicate with us and get our feedback. So they want to verify whether these companies are certified, because initially they have to verify. If it is certified, then you have to check whether the certificate is valid, the duration is valid, the product is tested and conformed. Those things they have to verify. If it is not a certified organization, they will take a legal action. Okay then? Okay, thank you very much.